Welcome to Red Eye Story Hour for tales told after midnight. Today I am reading the second part of Chapter 3. This is from the first novel, Outcast from the Mountain Warrior series. Second part of Chapter 3. I spent the day going from one place to another. At medical, I was surprised how much blood they drew for tests. I jokingly asked if they would replace some of it. When the solemn doctor just looked at me, I then asked if he was a vampire. Despite my laugh, he did the impossible and frowned even deeper as he looked up at me from under his brows and over my chart. In fact, he seemed more obsessed with my file and only looked at me when I made what he perceived to be a poor joke. I was glad to move on until I realized that my next stop was the DMV. The passport photo went much smoother. It saddened me that I now needed a passport to travel from Washington, D.C. into Virginia. But these were the times that we lived in. It's the new normal. I heard that platitude a lot, and it drove me nuts, even though I caught myself using it. We'd resigned ourselves to tyranny. When I arrived for my passport at the post office, they sent me to the DMV, where they now took care of that process. Walking in the doors, I groaned when I saw the multiple long lines at many counters. The workers sat behind bulletproof glass. This was redundant since I had to walk through a metal detector where they took my very small pocket knife that was as dangerous as a toothpick. However, once I stepped through the metal detector, an officious little bureaucrat ran up to me before I could get patted down by a goon in a uniform. The goon looked disappointed to be saved from the work. I instinctively looked for a name badge. But in martial law, they did away with nameplates for government workers so they could maintain their private lives as they destroyed everyone else's privacy. The bureaucrat kept looking between a photo of me and my face and muttered, "Follow me, sir. We've been expecting you." My connection with Tommy paid off. However, I stood my ground. Of course, but could I get my pocket knife back first? It's not even a weapon. I asked as I showed no inclination to follow him. Yes, sir," the bureaucrat sputtered. "Of course. Officer Peterson, could you get his knife, pocket utensil and give it back? Thank you." Officer Peterson scowled, but followed the bureaucrat's request. I smirked at Peterson as I pocketed my property and followed the bureaucrat. I commented that I was surprised they didn't protect the convenience store workers better. They have a more dangerous job, and a more crucial one at that. But the bureaucrat had the same sense of humor as the doctor. Or more likely, I'm not that funny when I'm being an ass. The rest of the day went smoothly until I received a text from Jennifer that said, "Call me immediately." I called her immediately and got her voicemail. I impatiently waited through the slow Eastern meditative music that was too heavy on the sitar. Nothing against sitars, but when you were in a hurry to talk to someone and you heard the Eastern version of elevator music, it grated on one's nerves. After an excruciating long time that was most likely only a few seconds, Jennifer's recorded voice began. She had the sleepy voice of a fake guru, and I pictured her leaving the message sitting in the lotus position on a cloud with snow-capped Himalayan mountaintops behind her. The message said, "Greeting, fellow journeyers. Let us stop the hate and be the peace we wish to be." The infernal, peaceful music continued for another few seconds. After that, she continued, "Please, until we progress enough to channel our thoughts telegraphically, leave your mundane number." More idiotic music. I had never been so happy to hear an electronic beep. I left the message, and she called me back an hour and a half later. She asked me to meet her for coffee at 4. It was a weird request. Neither anything extravagant as lunch or dinner. It sounded like she wanted a business-like communication rather than companionship. We met fortuitously at the door to the establishment, each arriving at the exact same time. We greeted each other with a gratuitous hug. I tried to plant a peck on her lips, but she turned her head in disgust so that I kissed her cheek. This irked me. I am usually not too forward with affection, but if I ever neglected to greet her with a small kiss on the lips, she would ask if something was wrong. She had insisted on this many times in the past. At this point, I felt like I knew the answer to my unasked question, and buying a coffee and spending a few moments together was pointless. But we were here already. Entering the door, I noticed that all the fake wood paneling and counters were very dark. I wondered if they had picked it because the color was similar to that of roasted coffee beans, or was it to hide coffee spills? We got to a table and carried on some awkward chit-chat until the barista brought our watered-down dandelion coffees. Jennifer had her head slightly bowed as she sipped her brew and looked up at me from under her brow and said, "You look alive." Before I could make a joke, she said, "Your eyes, they have a brightness that I haven't seen in a while." I nodded. I wanted to tell her about my plans, but spilling the beans on this plan could get me a bullet in my brain and immediate incineration. After a moment of silence, she said, "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" I smiled back at her and said, "I'm kind of seeing someone." She looked at me with a bit of mix of scorn and perplexion. "She's a vampire chick," I said with a mischievous laugh. She glared at me for a moment and then laughed. "You always had the quirkiest sense of humor. That's one of the things I have always loved about you." She ceased laughing and asked, "Now what is going on?" I replied without spite, but firmly, "That's the question I should ask you. I have texted and called you, but you have been ignoring me. I also noticed you referred to my humor in the past tense." She leaned in and answered in a very distant, New Agey voice, "I have been going through changes in my outlook. I feel that I am on the edge of a breakthrough. I feel that the potential that I am capable of, yet I feel like you are an unchanging lead weight that is dragging me down. I need to either be free of you so that I can soar, or I need you to change so that you can soar with me. Do you understand?" "I'm not sure," I replied. She was uncharacteristically blunt today, but the metaphors and platitudes still hit a lot. "Of course you don't," she replied in her mysterious fake guru voice. "Listen, I understand your high-minded metaphors, but when you say breakthrough, are you talking about some new age platitude? Are you talking about a career choice, or romantic direction? What? Maybe all of that and more. Maybe none of that and less," she said, annoyingly cryptic. I guessed that she was anticipating me being baffled. Instead, I nodded like I understood and said deadpan, "That makes sense." She looked at me with irritation. Then she said, as if I had communicated my confusion, "I am a Zen Buddhist. We communicate in koans." "They are," I interrupted with a smile, "paradoxes, of course, or not." "Don't mock my path," she said. "I am not mocking your path. When did you become a Zen Buddhist?" I asked with genuine curiosity. "I didn't become one. I realized that I was one when I read an article last week in Vogue magazine." "So, the article made you realize that you are a walking paradoxical koan." "No, it's much more than that." "Then what?" She looked to the ceiling as if searching for a cue card. "It's so much more." "And so much less," I added dryly. She gave me a dirty look. "How much more then?" I prompted. "It's like everything and like nothing," she said, struggling for more words. "I got it," I said. This conversation was sucking more energy out of me than if she was a literal vampire at my throat. "Now, without paradoxical speaking, are we together, broken up, or in some limbo?" At this point, I realized it was most likely over between us. That was my logical mind speaking. However, my emotions told me that cutting those heartstrings would have me down in the dumps for quite some time. Despite getting on my nerves on occasion, I had grown accustomed to her quirks. Needless to say, I had my own definite quirks, and she had accepted them better than anyone else in my past. I really didn't want to lose that. I felt like my sarcasm, which may have been self-destructive, was also defensive in preparation for the blow. She straightened with determination, and I was thankful that she would be the one to break it off, because I couldn't. However, she threw a wicked curveball. I came here to break it off, but I see something new inside of you. Your spirit seemed defeated in the past. Now I see fire in you, a new one. I still need a couple of weeks to myself to get my mind in balance, but I'd like to stay together. However, you must tell me the change that has taken place inside of you. The barista walked by, and I ordered another coffee. I had a long story to tell, to get off my chest. Although Tommy was my friend, I didn't feel like he took me seriously. Everything was a joke to him. I vacillated on telling her too much. I faced immediate execution if I told the wrong person, but once my coffee was placed before me, the Hoover Dam could not hold back my words. I started it as a vent, as I recounted my shame of screwing things up in the past. I then told her about the drone video, and the people in it who inspired me. I told her about my desire to infiltrate the Forbidden Zone for a few weeks. I did make a point to leave out specifics that would leave a trail. She looked me in the eyes the whole time. Her eyes widened so dramatically when I told her of my plan for infiltration that I suspected for a moment that it was a poorly acted surprise and not genuine shock. I finally finished my tale of my new ambitions, and as I stopped, I realized that I was out of breath. After breathing in deep a few times, I took a sip of coffee and waited for her to react. She nodded her head and almost blurted, "You are inspiring. I think that has great potential to make you a big hit, and of course, bring out the plight of the Outlanders. I love how you are thinking outside the box. It gives us a 2-week break from each other while you do your job, and with Tommy's help..." I interrupted. "I don't remember mentioning Tommy. If I fail, I don't want him charged as an accessory." "I thought you did mention him." She smiled and blinked her eyes dizzily. "If not, maybe I just assumed you needed him to pull some strings to get you to the access point." "Yes, he is a powerful friend," I agreed. I looked at her. She could go from hard-edged businesswoman to ditz and back in a second. It unsettled me. I suspected it was an act. We chatted after that. It felt good to have discussed everything with a friend, an intimate partner. I worried that my ambitions were insane, but seeing and hearing her encouragement placed my mind at ease. She reached over the table, took my hand. I held her hand and rubbed the back of it with my thumb. I felt newly in love with her. I felt like I could spend the rest of the day in the coffee bar with her, and any trivial subject discussed would be stimulating. After 5 minutes of small talk, I was eager to suggest we grab dinner, but at the moment, she quickly swallowed the last big gulps of her coffee and said, "I gotta go." And she abruptly stood. We left the building. We hugged, and when I tried to let go, she gave me that look. "Kiss me," she said. We kissed on the lips. The passion spread from my heart to my lips and arms as I returned her embrace. She pushed away gently with eyes that promised something. Not now, but definitely something in a few weeks. It melted my heart further. We said our goodbyes and then went our separate ways. I looked back and saw that she was on the phone. She gave me a worried look and quickly turned a corner. It placed a small lump of paranoia in the punch bowl of my passion for her. Lost in thought, I stumbled into an old man who cursed me even after I apologized. I ignored him and walked on with my mind replaying what happened between Jennifer and me. In the course of our conversation, I resented Jennifer enough to break up at least 3 times and fell madly in love with her 4 more. I told myself that when I grew old, I should remember to have more patience with the tempestuous passions of the youth. I touched my lips, as I could still feel her lips and passion on them, as tight as our intimacy was in that moment, and the more I dwelt on it, it felt like a kiss goodbye.